I actually don't have a prepared statement, but I come from a unique position here. Not only can I speak to you as a public official in West Seneca and the impact that the closure of the developmental center and the potential closure of this facility has on the taxpayers and citizens of the town, I can also talk to you from the unfortunate situation of a family member who was first diagnosed with mental illness at about the age of 17 in the 1970s. And at that time, a lot of the care that was presented, I think, could be called community-based. It was a very unfortunate situation. My parents, the parents of 6 children at home, and my brother suddenly, like overnight, descended into the depths of mental illness. And that has continued for over 40 years. The care that he received initially was basically, even though we would attempt to get him to some sort of community-based treatment, the care that he received was, number one, inadequate. It was the 1970s, so it was different. And the only real care we could get from him was when he descended deeply into mental illness. For example, he would stop eating. Generally, it was around the Christmas season. He would become depressed, I believe, even more so because of the family. Myself and my brothers and sisters and our children would be celebrating the holiday. And we would have to bring in the local town justice, and my brother would have to be committed. Unfortunately, the commitments are restricted by law, and I believe it was 7 days. So there was clearly not enough time for him to be assisted in his mental illness. And it took us approximately 10 years to get him into any consistent treatment. When the first episode he did come out of it, and he was somewhat a productive citizen. But with each episode, he got worse. And eventually, he had to be committed permanently to some sort of care. And he has stayed there since that day. So if you want to talk about cost, I wonder what the care of my brother's assistance and help over the last 45 years has been. And my big fear and what I saw, and I became very involved in this psychiatric center issue, the closure of this issue, for that reason mainly. What is this going to lead to? You know, what kind of care are these children going to get? How come beds are being reduced as opposed to increased? I spent many days in the psychiatric center in Buffalo visiting my brother, and I can tell you that it is, you can paint it, you can fix it up any way you want. It is not a pleasant place to be. Okay, everything is under lock and key, and now we're going to place children as young as 4 and as old as 18 in a dormitory type situation very similar to what you're going to see in the main psychiatric facility. You're also going to have to protect them. It's going to be like being in prison, similar to what it was for my brother in those years that he had to be assisted in the hospital. All right, so I have, from a family standpoint, I have very, very big concerns, and I wonder what changed from the 1970s to 2015 when the psych center was first opened, and I believe it was opened after a study was made that demonstrated that the type of care that they could get in West Seneca at that wonderful facility would give, that they could be much more successful in treating these children. And I'm just wondering what has changed and who has really looked at those studies, or have studies been updated. All right? I just don't understand the thinking of it. And I wish I'd had a copy of the commissioner's letter, because I go through that. I was actually seething up there, listening to what I was hearing, the typical bureaucratic approach, the typical thoughts about saving money, when I know that, for example, my brother's treatment over all of these years has got to exceed, it's got to be millions of dollars, and it could exceed any of the savings you might see. All I see out of this whole proposal and that's going forward is the desire to limit the expensive cost of hospitalization, even though that cost of hospitalization in the long run would save the state of New York money, because you would not have this long-term care and treatment, lifetime treatment, basically, which is what it is now for my brother. I also am very irritated that this whole closure procedure and all of this has been done pretty much without the input of any local official that I know of. All right, until I was approached a year ago about this, I didn't know that this was a plan. And I can tell you the state of New York, without question, is the town of West Seneca's worst landlord. We have many buildings that have been already abandoned, located on East and West Road, that are deteriorating rapidly, and the state refuses to do anything to at least secure and maintain these buildings. All right? They have told me unofficially that they would rather the building collapse than, say, do a demolition. For example, a demolition of a standing building is very expensive because of the asbestos issue. We also have the entire developmental center. It's over 400 acres of property that is infested with asbestos. There's a spider web of tunnels and accesses and piping underneath that facility that need to be remediated. Basically, we have a brownfield in the town of West Seneca. I made inquiries a couple of years ago about obtaining the what's called Building 9 up there. I thought it would be a wonderful community center for the town of West Seneca. It has a gym, a pool, a bowling alley, a lot of different available facilities. Well, the state of New York, first of all, did not want to release it. Secondly, during those conversations, they informed me that the Children's Psych Center, the developmental center, has a negative $18 million value, all because of the asbestos infestation. Even the sewer lines are asbestos piping and have to be replaced. So who in their right mind would want to buy that property and develop it when you're starting $18 million in the hole? I think it's wrong-headed by the state. The state, as I said, is our worst landlord. They're not cooperative. They're very hard to get a hold of. When we do talk to them, they tell us that nothing can be done. And it's on and on. And it seems as though their goal, just like it is in Perrysburg, is to allow these buildings to deteriorate to a point where they collapse, and then they can do emergency demolition and save the cost of asbestos removal. I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, the State Assembly and the Senate can address this issue, similar to our housing issues in town, and make it possible for this property to be rehabilitated in the short run. It's an excellent location. It can be developed. There can be many different types of development on that property, which would, of course, help the town of West Seneca, help the taxpayers, and we can move forward. The other thing that happens is these buildings are abandoned, and, for example, the CPC.
I'm just going to interrupt. You know what? As far as like the economic development piece, I'm not really here for that.
Right.
I understand what you're saying.
Well, I want you to be aware of it.
You know, throughout the state of New York, there are many buildings. They go from St. Lawrence to Middletown, New York, and most of the properties are very valuable. And, you know, I certainly will bring that message, as well as the senator and the assembly person. But I'm more interested in the care they're receiving and the community reinvestment at this point.
And again, if you want to just talk about this move that they're planning, the amount of money they're planning to spend could easily be applied to even a new building or to update the building on that site. How you can move children and warehouse them, basically, from this wonderful site. I've been there many times as a Lion, working there with the kids. To a downtown facility. You know, it's a warehouse. You have to take additional steps to protect these children. I don't understand how that can be an effective way to treat. And I often think that if my brother could have received the treatment that you heard about today, it would have been a different story for him.